Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. First, let me introduce Lady for anyone who hasn't seen her on these videos. She's my loud pup, very loud, so if you hear barking, it's typically her. But today I'm here with an update to my A Historian Reads Historical Fiction series. I've only done one video before, kind of doing a TBR of what books I was planning on reading. Now that we are done with February, I have an update, and this has been a very interesting project. I am learning a lot about how I articulate what I like and don't like in historical fiction. So let's start off with the bad news. I set a TBR for myself in the previous video. I have read 2 books in that list and I have DNF'd both of them. So let's start with those and what those DNFs have taught me. So the first book that I attempted to read was The Long Petal of the Sea by Isabelle Allende. So the book is set in the Spanish Civil War and focuses a lot on the connections between Spain and during the Civil War in Chile. Why I DNF this book? There was a ton of history, and I realized that as a historian, one of the things that I really look for in historical fiction is a good mix of both history but fiction. I need the fiction to be in there in my historical fiction, and this is a book that has a ton of history. Like, I felt like the first 20%, which is as far as I got, was just like a lot of history with very minimal character development and plot. And this is a problem for a historian, because if I want to learn about the Spanish Civil War or its connections to Chile, I will typically read non-fiction. That is where I go to get my history. I don't mind learning history and historical fiction, and actually I want to do some of that in historical fiction, but I need more character development. I need more plot in the story in order for it to work for me. So A Long Petal of the Sea did not work for me, but I think it might for a lot of you. I think that if you're not a historian, you will really like the historical aspects of it. The fact that it spends pages and pages just telling you what's happening with the Spanish Civil War, the politics, all of that, and then what the connection to Chile at the time is. So I do think this is not a bad book. I think this is a book that will find its audience out there, and a lot of you will probably be within that group. It just was not for me. I think I said in that video, one of my very best friends is a historian of Spain, and so typically I don't even need to go read an entire book to learn about the Spanish Civil War. I can call up my friend and be like, hey, you want to tell me about this? The Spanish Civil War is one of her expertise, and so it's something she and I have had long chats about, because her dissertation was connected to the Spanish Civil War, and so, like, you know, she knows a lot about the French abortion movement via me, and I learned a lot about Spain via her. So yes, that was a DNF, and I did a DNF it despite knowing that it was a good book and that it would work for a lot of people, because I'm also trying to not force myself to read books this year. I'm trying really hard to DNF books that are not the right ones for me. That brings me to the next book that I DNF'd, Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This is a book that a lot of historians really like, and I can see why. It is set in the court of Henry VIII, but looking at everything through the eyes of Thomas Cromwell. And what I think really works in this book is the narrative style. It's got a very different kind of narrative style. It's not going to work for everyone, because it does take a little while getting used to. It took me about 10% to really get into the style of writing in which Mantel writes. There's a lot of times in which she uses the pronoun he, and there are 3 men in a discussion in a room, and you don't really know who the he she is referring to is. I didn't mind that. Once I got into the style, I could figure out. Right? I liked the kind of family life, the way she delved into the family life of Thomas Cromwell. This is a book that in a different circumstance I would have finished reading, except for at the very same time I was reading Pachinko. And Pachinko is just such an amazing book that just Wolf Hall just did not compare to me, and I was finding myself feeling forced to read Wolf Hall when really I just wanted to read Pachinko. And so I had to set Wolf Hall to the side. I had to DNF it. I DNF'd it at like 23% as well. And I have now finished Pachinko, so I can tell you a little bit more about that book in a second. But yeah, Wolf Hall is a book that I think a lot of people will like. If you're interested in Henry VIII and can't get enough of that period, you'll like Wolf Hall. The other thing that Wolf Hall made me realize, though, is that I've been through my Henry VIII phase. There was a time in which I was consuming everything related to the time period and to that court. And I'm a little Henry VIII out, you know. I know the story. Like in the book, a lot of the tension is built around whether Henry VIII is going to be able to divorce Catherine or not. And I felt like, well, I already know he will. What is more interesting was Thomas Cromwell's life and his relationships, and that was just not holding enough of my interest in order to keep me going. Again, in comparison though to reading Pachinko. So let me tell you about Pachinko, because I will actually limit myself here. It's an amazing book, an amazing blend of history and just storytelling. I think that the best history does a lot of storytelling, and here is a book that just is pure amazing storytelling with enough history. It's a book very much set in its time and place. You know exactly when and where you are. In the story, you're following several generations of a Korean family, and you begin the story with the Japanese occupation of Korea. Then you follow the family into Japan, then into World War II, the Korean War, and then post all of that in Japan. It is beautifully written, and it's also what this book taught me is that one of the things that I really appreciate in historical fiction and just in historical writing period is simplicity. That the writing is simple, that the writing is not relying on any kind of technique or anything flashy. It's just very simple. What's brilliant is the storytelling, the characters, how the story is woven in together. That to me really, really works. And those are the kinds of history books and historical fiction books that I love. And so I loved Pachinko. Another book that I ended up wrapping into this project was Island Queen by Vanessa Riley. This is the book that's coming out in July, I believe. I'll make sure and put all that information down below. So I read an ARC via NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley for providing the ARC for me to read. This is a book in which you're following kind of several generations as well, but one woman, Dorothy Kirwan. And she is, this is a story based on a real life character. This woman existed, and you can tell that Riley just did amazing research. Like, I swear, Vanessa Riley needs to get an honorary history degree just because of all the research she's done for all her previous historical romances, and then for this one. So Dorothy Kirwan Thomas was a woman that was born into slavery in the Caribbean. She ends up working her butt off to earn her freedom, that of her mother, and then basically every family member she can find. And it's that story, the story of her as a former enslaved woman, as a black woman in the Caribbean, making a fortune. And I just love the strength of the character, how Riley writes her, the way that the men are written into the story, because the men in Dorothy's life really present roadblocks. Rather than being assets to her, these men are really roadblocks to her achieving her goals. And I just love the whole story, the whole writing. It's, again, another book that is very simply written, but it's so rich in story and plot and character development. It's the perfect combination for me. And it will teach you some of that history as well. So just perfection. So to recap then, what I have learned is that as a historian, I don't want a ton of just like pure history in my historical fiction. I want simple writing. I don't want the writing to be relying on too much technique. And I want a story with characters and plots. And so as a result, I'm going to be reevaluating some of the other books that were on my list. So other books that were on my list were The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follet. I might still give him a shot. That book is just, it's super long, so I might reevaluate that. The Paris Seamstress I will read by Natasha because that's a book I have in physical form, and I want to read it and decide if I'm going to keep it or not. And then The Pull of the Stars by Donoghue I'm going to read because it's set in Ireland, I believe, and I like the idea of that setting, so I'll still give that a chance. But I am also going to fold in some of the recommendations that people gave me in that original TBR video. So one that was recommended by Shannon, her channel is That So Po, was Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, by Nam-Joo. So this is a book that I'm actually going to buddy read with my friend in Korea. It might be a little while until we get to it because she and I have a long list of books that we want to get to. Another book, who recommended this? I don't remember who. I'll list their info down below. But this is El Paraiso de la Otra Esquina by Mario Vargas LLosa. So this is the story of Flora Tristan and her connections to Latin America. This book is in Spanish, and so that was perfect for me because I am going to be reading more Spanish in 2021. That's perfect. And then I did pick up Margaret Pinard's The Keening. So Margaret has a author channel here on YouTube, and I've been watching her videos. They're just really great. If you haven't checked out her channel, please go check it out. I will link it down below. This is the book set in the 19th century, and it sounds really good. It sounds up my alley, and so I'm going to go ahead and add it into this project. So overall, even though I ended up DNFing 2 books, I feel like this project is going really well. I do want to add 2 more points on this video that I've realized as Shannon's been hinting in a lot of her comments to me as she and I chat. I actually really love historical romance, and I read a ton of historical romance. In fact, I'm going to start reading Beverly Jenkins' Breathless this weekend. And it's a category that I'm not going to include in this video just for the purposes of trying to limit the confines of this project. But I love historical romance. I also like historical fiction in middle grade. I just read Root Magic in January, which just does an amazing job about discussing, kind of that historical setting, I should say, a setting that plays set in Jim Crow, the Jim Crow South. And again, I think that those are the places where I've been really gravitating towards my historical fiction, towards romance and middle grade, because I think they do a really fabulous job. If you want, I don't know, maybe I should put it out to vote. If you want me to include those genres into this project, I will. But for now, I think I'm going to keep them separate and just focus on just my kind of more traditional adult historical fiction for this particular project. The other thing that I realized is that I actually do read quite a bit of historical fiction. A lot of it, though, is set outside of the US and Europe. And that's why I think, because those are my areas of specialties, I think I tend to not include some of these other books in my mind into this category, but I will. I am planning on participating in the Read So Lit Read-a-thon that is hosted by Dee Dee over at Brown Girl Reading. Every month she picks a book by a Black author dealing with usually Black history, Black world history. And I have loved every single one of the books that has been part of that read along. And I haven't participated yet in 2021, mostly because I've been all over the place. But I'm planning on focusing a little bit more there and participating in the Read So Lit Readathon. So if you're interested, I will leave some of those links down below. So again, if you want to leave me any recommendation, this is an ongoing project. I will take any and all recommendations down in the comments section. If you read historical fiction and you have any thoughts about some of the things that I've been learning about my own historical fiction reading, please feel free to chime in. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.